So we're gonna. This is the last section. Yay! I don't think I have anything left, but we're gonna switch gears here and talk about alternative fuels. It's a bit of a hot topic, so I thought I'd just touch on this a little bit with you guys. So, what are alternative fuels? SB 989, also, you guys might associate that number with secondary containment testing, as do we, but there's also a lot of other things that went on with this Senate bill. It ordered MTBE to be phased out of gasoline in California by January of 2004. And MTBE is a fuel additive, and MTBE helped reduce exhaust emissions, so when they phased this out, they need to find alternatives. So they started looking toward alternative fuels. By alternative, I mean not fossil fuels. So they're renewable resources, where fossil fuels are not renewable. Okay? I have biodiesel and ethanol highlighted because I'll go into a little bit more detail about those two since they're the most common. But of course, we see methanol, hydrogen, and electricity as some other options, yet less common. So just to give you a little background, do any of you guys, are you familiar with biodiesel at all? Do you see it in your jurisdictions coming through? No? Thank you. So we have vegetable oil, animal fat-based diesel fuel, and it's typically made by chemically reacting these fats with an alcohol, okay? So it's often blended with conventional diesel, and you end up getting some sort of blend with a certain percentage of biodiesel, and the remaining fuel will be petrodiesel. So one example would be B20, a very common blend that we see. So in that respect, you're going to have 20% biodiesel, and then the remaining 80% will be the traditional petrodiesel. Ethanol, something else we see, not as common, not such a hot topic, but we do have some E85 tanks in San Diego. And this is an alcohol that's made, let me back that up. It's most often used as a biofuel additive for gasoline as well. And it's a form of renewable energy that can be produced from agricultural feedstocks. And some of the common crops include potato, sugarcane, and probably most commonly corn. And you see these higher percentages of ethanol blends. They're definitely becoming more common. We've had a few E85 tanks go in San Diego. And it's just becoming a little bit more of a hot topic. And it also has a similar designation where an E85 tank would mean that it's 85% ethanol and the remaining 15% would be gasoline. Okay, so for alternative fuel, regulations still apply, of course, because you're dealing with the tank contents. And for an underground storage tank, it needs to be approved by an independent testing organization with the tank contents. So when you're approaching some of these alternative fuels that are new to the market, this is something that you have to keep in mind. You still need to have the same regulations apply to these alternative fuels as they did with the more traditional fossil fuels. So you need the approval by an independent testing organization, of course. And then an owner-operator needs to use system components that are compatible with whatever hazardous material is being stored in these underground tanks. Okay, and for components approved for the installation of a UST system on or after July 1st of 2004, you need to be able to include a list of compatible products. And also the release detection, it must be tested by an independent testing laboratory and be approved to function with whatever substance is being stored. So that's fine, that makes sense, but what's the issue? What's the issue with these alternative fuels? They're new to the market. Nobody knows how they're going to react with tank components. So compatibility. With the exception of biodiesel blends up to B5, USTs to date, they've not received this required independent testing organization. Okay, and I'll touch on the reason why that B5 designation stands out. Functionality. You have functional equipment that needs to be working with these components or this tank content as well. And similar to the compatibility, blends greater than B5 are still lacking that functionality approval. So that brings us to the biodiesel emergency regulations for the temporary storage of biodiesel. Are you all familiar with this? No? Okay, I'll go in a little bit of detail for those of you that are not. But basically it was effective June 9th, 2009, and it's a 3-year variance from the required independent organization certification of leak detection equipment. That means that they get kind of a 3-year time frame to get these certifications. So they're allowed to store biodiesel blends B20 and below in this 3-year time frame with the intention of at the end of 3 years, we're going to have all these compatibility documents. So that was the intention of this variance. Like I said, it specifically allows these systems to store blends up to B20, and that's it. One requirement, of course, you must have a double wall tank. We would not allow the variance for the storage of even B10 or B5. Actually, B5 would. You have a question? In San Diego, we've had about 16 that we've done. Have you guys issued any out there? So if you want biodiesel, come on down. Sunny San Diego. Not necessarily. It's new technology. I think it's still new. People are trying to figure it out. The question was, is it cheaper? I think it's more green. You know, it's a big topic, and I think one of the main issues that make it appealing is that it is a renewable resource. We're not relying on fossil fuels. But I don't know that that it's cheaper. I've heard actually that it's more expensive to produce. But you know, this is a big deal in California, so I think stuff like this we're going to see it here first, and you get a lot of pressure at the state level for all these air emission reductions, and that's going to trickle down and affect, you know, even the UST programs at a local level. So I mentioned before, you have this, you know, this variation for B5. Initially, any combination of biodiesel and petrodiesel needed this variance, but back in October 2010, they made the decision that B5 was similar enough to diesel that all the paperwork and all the third-party testing that applied to regular diesel would also apply up to blends of B5. So if you are putting B5 in your tank, you're not going to need to go through the variance process. You'll just need to go through the typical Coupa processes of when you change your tank content. So you're going to need to have a new tank information page on file with your local Coupa, as you would if you switched from 87 to 91 grade, just to have your paperwork up to date. So here's a list of the variance requirements. Like I mentioned before, double wall USTs. If you have a single wall, don't even bother. Components, additional components like piping also needs to be double walled. So you want to have that approval for the use of petroleum diesel at minimum. You want to be in operational compliance. And then you need to submit to your local Coupa a notice of intent to let us know that you're going to store this biodiesel. You're going to need a new tank information form. Like I said, as you would for any tank content change, this would need to come through your local jurisdiction. And then you also need a written statement by the owner indicating that the leak detection methods and your equipment will function with the your biodiesel blend that you plan on putting into your tank. So this should be accompanied by documents from the manufacturers indicating this compliance. So that's a lot of information. You just want to put this new fuel in your tank, and you need to come up with all this information for your Coupa, and at which point we need to review it all. And for San Diego, I'm the one that reviews and gives these variances for our sites here. And luckily for them, for us, California Biodiesel Alliance, they put together a really nice website filled with this type of information that's kind of like a one-stop shop for owners that want to submit all the required documentation. So let me just show you. This is just a screenshot of Biodiesel Alliance website. And there's a section under their regulatory matters that has the heading compliance for B20 and USTs. Okay, so not only do they give you information, but they also give you forms. These are forms that meet the requirements of the variants that all you need to do is print out and fill out. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just print them out and fill them out. It includes the notice of intent, which is one of the requirements. It includes the testament of compatibility from the owner that we require, and also the leak detection functionality. And I think most importantly and most efficient, it also has a list. I don't know if you guys can see, but it provides the compatibility documentation from different manufacturers indicating that B20 blends, and they also list other percentages as well, that they can print out that are already written and can be provided to your local Coupa. So for example, if you're an owner and you have a containment solutions tank, all you have to do is go straight to here, and whoever the representative at Containment Solutions has already made that internal decision and has an official letter indicating that they are compatible with B20. So if you know your tank components, then you can go and print out the different components. And I've only show a screenshot here of tanks, but it goes on to the other components and leak detection equipment as well. So this is a great resource. Okay, stay with me. This is the last slide. So, of course, there's an end date for this variance. It's going to become inoperative in one of these scenarios. So either 90 days after the date of a decision of either that biodiesel blends greater than B5 are included in the standard diesel, which means that they're good to go. That has not happened yet. Or it's determined that they're not compatible. That hasn't happened yet either. So what happens? Or it becomes inoperative 36 months from the effective date of this section, which was what? 09, June? We're in February? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? So that's a problem. The idea of this variance was that it would give time for these manufacturers to get the documentation. But it's very expensive to run these tests, and no one's stepped up to the plate yet. So what's most likely going to happen, just words I've heard coming down the pipeline, is that this variance might become a permanent solution. If the requirements needed for the variance might just be what you permanently need to do in order to store this fuel. Right. So they would be good to go. They wouldn't have to, we might make a comment on our internal database. Sue asked if we already have sites that have this variance and we've given the go-ahead, they wouldn't really have to do anything more because they've already gone through the process, especially if the regulations don't require additional information. We might simply update our personal files to reflect that this is a permanent solution based on how the regs read. But from here on out, I imagine if that is what happens, because I think they're going through the hearing process right now, then 2 years from now, if someone wants to store biodiesel, they're simply going to have to go through the same process, and it won't necessarily be a variance. It'll be the permanent solution to biodiesel and any other alternative fuels that does not have this. Well, I don't want to say that, but at least for biodiesel and perhaps ethanol. Do any of you guys have ethanol tanks in your jurisdiction? So come on down to San Diego if you want ethanol. So with that, pop quiz, can't leave yet. So if a facility is issued a red tag, are they required to empty their UST contents? No, you guys are paying attention. It just simply prohibits the delivery of fuel, okay? Upon notification by the owner that a violation has been corrected, the local agency must reinspect the UST system within how many days? That's right, 5. Oh, not yet. If a facility has a B5 UST, will they need to go through the variance process? Oh, thank you. No. Only tanks where the biodiesel exceeds 5% total would require a variance. And when does the variance become inoperative? June? July? June? Okay. Yes, June 2012. Yes and no. Is this becoming more popular? We had a company submit 7 variance requests, and then they actually changed their mind. I think they decided they tried at 2 of their sites instead. So I think it's becoming popular, but people are still being cautious about it based on their scenarios or their systems. Especially those with more than one facility, they might just do a test site and see how it goes. And I think one of the reasons is also economics. I think one thing they were telling me is that I think in the initial use of these tanks, you need to do a lot more filtering. So they were taking that into consideration from a cost perspective as well. So it's definitely an economic thing as well. Last thing, I mentioned that State Water Board has local guidance letters, and here's the link for that. And it's a really good program. It gives you some more information on some of the hot topics, some details on tanks installed 2003, 2004. That can be confusing. And also some of the other hot topics, such as the vaulted tanks and tanks that are below the surface of the ground but within structures. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I mentioned before, we're coming on 4 o'clock, so we're doing pretty good on time, and we might just end it here. But what I'd like you guys to do is I do have this PowerPoint I can send to you, to your emails, regarding the ICC questions. It's 167 slides, so it's a nice little presentation. So it's not part of our presentation, though.